a visit to Silicon Valley, I witnessed for the first time the impressive demonstration of technology and sportsmanship in the oldest trophy in international sport.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the main stage the current defender of the America's Cup, Oracle Team USA!
Larry Ellison's Oracle Team USA was within an inch of losing the 34th America's Cup before a magnificent comeback with the 8th straight race it needed to retain the cup. The AC-72 features wing sails and hydrofoils that enable it to reach speeds up to 52 miles per hour, a speed that is unheard of in the history of America's Cup racing. Oracle Team USA's determination against all odds is a fitting metaphor for the 4-decade-old Oracle now facing challenges from an increasing number of smaller, aggressive technology rivals.
The AC-72, designed and built by the team, has fiber optic cabling throughout and up to 400 sensors on board measuring everything from wind speed to strain on different parts.
The America's Cup is a billionaire's game. Winning the America's Cup was expensive. It is estimated that Silicon Valley billionaire Larry Ellison spent between 170 to 200 million US dollars on the campaign for his boat. For many years, Susan has run her own public relations firm in San Francisco. To tap into a vast experience from working with prominent clients in the tech industry, I scheduled a visit to her residence.
I've always invited the entrepreneurs, I mean, for like the last 15 years, over to my house. Often they're working such long hours, they're not likely to make dinner for themselves, but really more than anything, I just love it, and I love introducing them to other people. I think when you're working on a startup, your vision can be very sort of myopic, and you have this specific goal in mind, which is to launch your company. And equally as important are meeting other people and beginning to foster relationships, both personally, of course, but also for business. So inviting entrepreneurs over is a great way for them to meet other people in a much more relaxed setting. They can sit in front of the fireplace, kick around ideas, but also for them to mix with people from different worlds, you know, artists and filmmakers, politicians. I think great ideas tend to come not from like hanging out with like, but from people debating, you know, an artist debating with, you know, an astronaut. That's interesting. San Francisco is a small city physically, and also the number of people here. You run into people that you know after living here only for a few months very, very quickly. And I think for folks who are moving here from abroad and coming here to you know, kick around the idea of launching a startup, I think that makes moving here far less scary than perhaps moving into a city like New York. It's a very friendly city to move to, and very doable and manageable city to move to. And it has great restaurants, and it's beautiful. And if you like the outdoors, there's so much to do here.
So I'm born and raised. I'm from San Francisco. Fifth generation. My family have been here for a long time, so I'm personally pretty partial to the area. I love it. It's a beautiful city geographically. It's a very unique city in terms of sort of our values and yeah, in terms of our values, and I think we're a leader on a lot of things. We push the envelope on a lot of things too. It's an international city. There's such a confluence of different cultures, and there's from all over the globe. You'll hear different types of accents on the bus. You'll hear, in terms of technology, which is different from I think other places, maybe in Silicon Valley, not traditionally. You can walk down the street in this neighborhood. There's 15 different co-working spaces. I can point to major technology companies and a multitude of smaller startups, and they're all in walking distance, and you can go to a local deli and you can hear people talking about projects, or you can go to a coffee shop or a bar and you can hear the engineers talk about what they're working on, and it's just a pretty unique, interesting confluence. It's not a very big city too, it's only 7 by 7, but yet it has very unique neighborhoods with their own identities, like a mini New York City almost. So I think that's a good benefit to everyone.
I mostly walk places because San Francisco is a very walkable city. Public transportation is, I mean, it does exist, but it's I think it's easier just to walk most places. And usually, if I can't walk, I'll just take an Uber cab. I really like being part of the technology scene here. I mean, I like the fact that when you walk into a cafe, there's just laptops everywhere, and people are coding and working on stuff. I know that's not for everybody, but I enjoy that. I mean, there's similar scenes too like that. You know, like New York has a startup scene too. Austin, Texas, I've heard is like that as well. But I think San Francisco is kind of special in the fact that it's just sort of everywhere and it's all around you. I think sometimes you have to make an effort to kind of get outside of that when you're working on something, because it can be a bit of an echo chamber sometimes. So if you want to get real feedback from people that are not necessarily involved in any sort of hype, you have to make an effort to put yourself outside of that. But in general, I think it's really good to be around like-minded, ambitious people that are working on fun things. You know, you get like a good energy boost when you're around people that are doing that.
All right, cutting red tape. Now this black tape. Congratulations, GitHub, and thank you. And let's celebrate Innovation Month in San Francisco. With that, how about a 3, 2, 1 countdown? Yeah.
Mayor Lee is a huge supporter of technology and innovation in the city of San Francisco. He's worked very hard to work with different groups and different sectors to promote the technology sector in the city. There is over 1,600 technology companies and startups in San Francisco, which is over 40,000 employees in that industry. The idea is that San Francisco, we could maintain ourselves as the innovation capital of the world, would be the main goal. But really where our organization comes in is to leverage the collective power of the technology sector as a force for civic action. So to work with the technology companies and startups as a sort of singular vocal platform that we can connect them and engage them in historical issues in San Francisco and look at solutions in new ways.
San Francisco is the innovation capital of the world, but it's also the capital of this, and this, and this, and this. It'd be awesome if we used technology to fix some of the problems that San Franciscans see every single day. Let's give it a shot.
Jonathan Bodenza has been in the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem for more than a decade. Having met Jonathan at a coding bootcamp in Kuala Lumpur earlier this July, I reached out to him to learn more about his programming experience.
I started programming pretty young. My father is an accountant, and so he does a lot of work on spreadsheets. And he had an Apple II computer. Actually, it wasn't an Apple II. It was this thing called a Laser, which is like an Apple II clone. I don't think they exist anymore. And sometimes I would hang out at his office. I think I was around 9. And yeah, I would just hang out at his office and play with the computer, and mostly just play with games and stuff. But eventually I got bored with all the programs that he had for it, and it was like one disk that said AppleSoft Basic Tutorial, and it sounded really boring, so I didn't use it for like the longest time. And then eventually I got so bored I put it in and I tried it, and it was actually a tutorial on how to code Basic, and that just kind of sucked me into it. And so I did BASIC for a number of years, and then I had an uncle who was a C programmer, and he taught me some C, and that was probably my next language. And then I got into C++, and you know, nowadays I do mostly like Ruby or JavaScript or Objective-C or something like that. I think Napster was a really good experience for me because there was a lot of things that went wrong in Napster, but one thing that we had right is we had a product that people were in love with and just used obsessively. And I think what I've learned the most at Napster is that as long as you get the product right, you can fix a lot of other problems that you have along the way. I mean, ultimately, Napster wasn't able to fix those problems, but I've worked at companies since then where the product wasn't really quite right, and we had to do all these other things to fix problems. Whereas it would, like for example, I remember at Napster we had like 3 different sets of version control software. Like I think we were using CVS and Perforce and maybe something else. And whenever you had to move code between teams, it was a hassle. I mean, that's an awful way to run an engineering team. But I mean, that was just like a small detail. You know, it doesn't really matter because people were so excited, they were so motivated to keep working. I mean, that was just like kind of a small trivial example of something that I wouldn't do at another startup. I'm still friends with a lot of people at Napster. That was kind of like my college experience, I think, because I didn't really go. I did like a year of college, and then I was kind of bored there, and me and all my friends all moved out to California to do Napster. So that was kind of like my college experience. I mean, I lived in a house with a bunch of guys that were my age, and it was very, very dorm-like. Like the place was always a mess. There was just beer bottles everywhere. I remember there was, we had this house that was right next to a professor's house, professor at Stanford, and we didn't have wireless network. We didn't have any wireless internet, and so we used to all like huddle around this table in the corner where we could get his Wi-Fi, and he was okay with it, but it was kind of a hassle. I remember I had this one roommate who had since gone on to be a designer at Facebook. He was one of their early employees, and he sort of like set their whole tone. And I remember one time I came home and he was just sitting on the floor. We had no furniture, so he was just sitting there on the floor in this small corner where there was Wi-Fi available, and he was like only lit up by his laptop. And I remember saying to me, "Jonathan, come over here. Look at this. Look what I made." And he showed it to me, and he's like, "See, this is the scroll bar that's on OS 10. OS 10 was pretty new at the time." And so she was showing it to me, scrolling up and down, and then this is a scroll bar that I made. Do you see the difference? And they looked absolutely identical. But he said, if you go like this on this one, it flickers a little bit, and mine is like so smooth. And I mean, he was right. If you looked really closely, you could see that. But anyway, he had just this maniacal focus on detail, and I mean, he's since gone on to do pretty well because that sort of like focus on detail with design is very important.
I came to America in 1999. It was right after the Asian financial crisis, so our ringgit got severely devalued. At the time, my dad only had enough money to pay for 2 years of my 4-year college tuition. But yeah, he was brave. He saw that this is where my future is, so he sent me anyway. So when I first got here, I had to take at one point 3 jobs just to make enough to pay for the rest of the tuition as well as living expenses. At the same time, doing a degree in engineering, which was quite taxing as well. But yeah, made it through college. It was definitely a culture shock when I first arrived. A lot of things are very different, but over time, I think I've learned and adapted to the environment. I was in Wall Street for almost 4 years, first working for Bank of America and then working for Goldman Sachs. And it was very interesting times in Wall Street because at that time it was a huge boom. which eventually led to the bust in 2008. So we saw a huge growth and heavy investment in technology at that time, where all the banks depend heavily on their trading systems to give them the competitive edge. So they invest heavily in hiring the best technologists. So at that time, I started working in 2004. It was right after the dot-com bust. So a lot of talent from Silicon Valley was actually moving over to Wall Street to help build up the systems. So yeah, there was a lot of innovation in terms of technology in Wall Street at that time. I was actually laid off by Goldman in 2008, and that was the best thing ever because it gave me the opportunity to take risk. So I pretty much took a 50% pay cut and moved to Silicon Valley and got a job at a startup called Looped. The culture was entirely different from the banks. It was very, very laid back. People show up very late to work and they stay very late. It was, a lot of young people. The CEO was in his early 20s at that time. So the whole company was run by, young kids who drop out from Stanford. So yeah, we're competing at even at Wall Street and the banks, we're going at a very fast pace. But even in Wall Street, in Silicon Valley, the pace is even faster because the competition is so intense and so fierce. So we're constantly trying to push the envelope and as fast as we could. I actually started Agility much later. Agility was started in 2011, 2012. So with the growth of Wall Street, we hit the financial crisis in 2008. That's when a lot of banks start scaling down their investment in technology. So at that time, it was a reverse. Then a lot of talent from the investment banks actually started moving over back to Silicon Valley and back to the startup world.
We met Choke through, so one of our employees at the time knew Choke from before. And so she introduced us, and we were in desperate need at the time for people to help us develop all the products, and we had a huge pipeline of products that we wanted to develop to help consumers. And it's very hard here in the Bay Area to build an engineering team really quickly. It's very hard to hire a lot of engineers, and we needed a lot of work done. So we reached out to Choke, and then we were ultimately he was able to help us. We set up teams for all the different products that we wanted to work on, and that was, more than a year and a half ago. So it's been great.
And so now we're kind of like in that challenge, we're like, what's next?
Yeah, what are we doing? Yeah. Here there's still a very strong company.
When did I first meet you? Actually, I think I like the best relationships. I actually met Chalk on a personal level first. So when I was starting my startup, Playdom, one of the people that worked with me is this great guy called Mike Camarano. And Chalk was actually Mike's roommate. And so I had a chance to go skiing with Chalk. We hung out a couple of times at Chalk's parties. And I actually didn't hear that Chalk had a startup until much later. And then by that time, I already knew that Chalk was a great guy. So we had some work to do. So obviously, I would trust Chalk.
I think Ling has this talent in evaluating companies. Anytime we're talking to a company, either from trying to acquire a client or investment or other kind of relationships, I always talk to Ling about it, especially if there are companies where he's interested in, areas he's interested in. And he just has this eye for asking the right questions and formulating a very good opinion about companies. The best thing about America and Silicon Valley in general is they don't look at where you're from. They don't look at your race. They don't look at pretty much your background. It's what can you do for them? What can you deliver for them? So one handicap we had, as a foreigner coming at the beginning is learning the culture, learning how people do work here, how business works. Because we don't have our parents or relatives kind of ingrained that in us. So we had to come in, learn, and adapt. But once we adapted, it's pretty much there are plenty of opportunities here for us to grow and compete with everyone else.
So I worked at JP Morgan for a little over 6 years doing fixed income trading. So I was very much in the finance world, and then my co-founder, the CEO, Tim, was also in the finance world as well. So we were kind of knee-deep in the financial crisis and everything, and got to see exactly how the financial crisis impacted people's finances and everything. I got to see kind of firsthand how like personal finance kind of ignorance, I guess, really hurt the average consumer. Financial products are very complicated, and so even something that seems as simple as a credit card will come with a laundry list of different fees and different kind of gotcha issues. And while none of it's really rocket science, it does require a lot of time for somebody to sit down and really go through all the paperwork and understand all these things. So our approach is basically to take all that information, to take all that data and present it in a very simple format, so that if somebody wants to make a decision like what scholarships they should be applying for, or what mortgage they should be applying for, then it should be a very simple interface that shows them exactly what's better than the alternatives.
When you started, did you bootstrap?
Yep. Yeah, totally self-funded.
How was it?
I mean, it was tough. It took us a couple of years before the company was ever making enough money for me and Tim to get our first paycheck. So, so that was a little tough. But at the same time, because of the mission and the fact that we're trying to do what's objectively best for the consumer, it's really hard for us, it's not really possible for us to raise money from like a venture capitalist or an outside investor, because their priorities would be very different from what our priorities are. And so they'd be a bit too focused on trying to monetize the end users, get a return on their investment, all that stuff, when we believe that educating the consumers is our primary priority, and monetizing them is the second. So, and so that would be very difficult for an investor to swallow. So we just avoided dealing with that altogether.
This is called a monome, and it's handmade by this this couple. I think they're in Philadelphia or somewhere on the East Coast. They hand make these and they sell them on the internet. And basically, they're just it hooks up with a USB port to your computer, and there's just all these little LED lights that you can push, and there's really no defined function for it. You can program it to do whatever you want. So these lights will light up in any programmed method that you want, and then you can push them. And people use it a lot for music. So you could write a program that said, every column is a different beat, and each row is a different sound, and you can plug things in that way. Or you can use it to slice up samples or loops. Anyway, I saw this and I thought this was really cool, because this is like the most simple instrument you could have. It's just a bunch of buttons, and it's infinitely hackable. Like it comes with no predefined purpose. You can design it to do whatever you want. So I saw this, and I thought it'd be really cool to have this on the web so that anyone can, because these are like kind of limited, because it's just 2 people building these, and you have to buy them on eBay, or I bought this from a friend of mine who sold it to me secondhand. So I wanted to make a web version of this that was also collaborative. So I thought it'd be cool if I could program on one of these, but then someone else can come in and like put their beats on top of mine. So I made BeatLab, and BeatLab basically looks like this, but you can upload your own sounds onto the grid. So people add drums and loops and samples, and they get really creative with it. I'm always surprised at, like, with such a simple tool, what they can pull off. A lot of them are really young, teenagers. A lot of them don't have access to any music software other than BeatLab or a few other free ones on the web. There actually really isn't that much available to you that doesn't cost a lot of money. So if you want to get into electronic music and you're young and you don't have much money, your options are basically to pirate the software or to find like free things like BeatLab that you can use. So music's always been a passion of mine, and I've done a couple music startups. I did Napster and then another one called Ruckus, which was kind of similar. But it's such a hard business to be in because you have to license content, and I think the fundamental problem with the music technology business is you're licensing content from people that think it's worth more than it is, and you're trying to sell it to people who think it's worth nothing. You know, so you're stuck in like this infinitely thin margin. So I think it's kind of an impossible business model to make money off of selling music. But I do think it's cool to provide something to let people make music. That I think is like a very new territory, and so I was excited to build something in that space. Everything in there is kind of focused towards doing things in like a collaborative, social way. Because I feel like music, I think, is fundamentally a collaborative endeavor. Even if you're working by yourself, you're still borrowing off of ideas that you heard from other people. So with B-Lab, I try to make it very collaborative from the ground up.
Tune in next week as we explore how educational institutes like Stanford University plays a role in entrepreneurship.